Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. As always, my name is Todd and I'm an old-ass mountain biker. What you see in front of me is my new 2021 Fezzari Cascade Peak. And one of the things that drew my attention to this specific bike was the mixture of old, tried and true and new school, and that's in the form of their suspension. For the rear shock, we have a Fox Float Eval, and in the front we have DVO's Diamond D1 Forks. Now you might not have the name recognition when you hear DVO, but these are premium forks with a fair amount of customization, and we'll really take a look at that when we go to set them up. Before we get started, there are a couple of things that we will definitely need. You're going to need a ruler because we have to measure how much of the existing travel we use. That is referred to as sag. You're going to need a high pressure shock pump. I have one here, and DVO has something called off the top, and that requires a 5mm hex key to make the adjustments. I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the air from the front fork. I'm going to remove all of the sensitivity from our OTT. We'll talk more about that when we set up the forks. Remove any of the rebound, high-speed compression and low-speed compression, and then we will get ready to set everything up. So just give me a minute. All right, so with a factory reset of sorts in place, we're going to start by setting up both the rear shock and the front forks according to the manufacturer's specifications. So when it comes to the rear shock, they suggest you start with the PSI equal to your riding weight. So with my gear and everything, I'm about 170 pounds. We'll put in 170 PSI into the rear shock, and about 8 clicks of rebound should set me up correctly. As far as low speed compression is concerned, it's got the simple open trail closed, or 1, 2, 3. We're going to leave it open for the time being. So let's start by getting some air into that rear shock. Fox recommends between 25 and 30% sag in the rear shock. So the way you find out what your sag is, you measure the full travel. In this case, I have almost 2 inches of travel. 25% of that is going to be 1/2 inch. So as long as I'm a little bit above 1/2 inch of travel under normal riding weight, I should have a relatively plush ride. So now we set it up with 170 PSI. There you go. You can see it was already at 170 PSI. I will give Fezzari full credit. They did an excellent job setting up the suspension when I got the bike. But after owning it for about 3 months, I think I'm ready to dial it in for my own personal preferences. And of course, don't forget to return your cap. So I'm a relatively new rider. I'm not super fast. And Fox recommends that you start with 8 clicks of rebound for this particular fork. I'm going to set it at 6, so it's a little bit slower. I don't need the rear wheel dropping into every single hole given how slow I ride. So we currently have full dampening on the rebound, and we're going to add 6 clicks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have left the low speed compression wide open, so when we go ahead and test the fork or the shock, it's not impacting how much sag we use. So let's go ahead and check that out now. Keep in mind, this is only the first time that I'm really setting up my suspension from start. If you know a better way to measure sag than how I'm demonstrating on this video, do me a favor and let me know in the comments below. Basically, what we're going to do is apply our body weight to the bike, cycle through a few times to make sure the seals are loosened up, and then once we're ready, I'm going to add my body weight to the seat, and I'm going to go ahead and slide this O-ring all the way to the top and measure how much travel we use. Let's see how it's done. All right, you get off the bike carefully so as not to overuse the travel and get a false reading. We're hoping for at least 1 inch of travel being used. All right, rear shock was pretty simple, but now we're gonna turn our attention to these DVO Diamond D1 forks. And as I mentioned before, these are premium forks with a lot of adjustability to them. We're gonna look at things like OTT or off the top. We're gonna look at air pressure and its impact on sag. We're gonna look at rebound. We're gonna look at the high-speed compression, and we're gonna look at the low-speed compression. And just like with the shock, we want to look at sag, but a little differently. DVO is really nice, and they give us a couple of different setup charts that we'll be able to use today. And you can see over here that DVO recommends between 15 and 20% sag. For the 140 millimeter forks that I have, that means between 21 and 28 millimeters, or 0.8 and 1.1 inches. I'm gonna look for a little bit more of a plush and supple ride, so I'm probably going on the low end of the air pressure, the higher end on OTT, and then we'll take a look at rebound, high-speed compression, and of course low-speed compression. One of the things that I like about DVO, as I mentioned before, is that they give us these setup charts. So this over here is the base tuning chart. In full riding gear, I weigh 170 pounds. So you can see here, that means that I need between 3 and 7 full rotations of adjustment to the OTT. This is something you don't do in clicks, it's in full rotations. So let's take a close-up look and see how we set that. You're going to find the OTT adjustment on the same side of the fork as you add air pressure. OTT is measured in full rotations, and we're adding 6 rotations based on the setup chart. And it's full rotations. So that was 1, 2, 6 adjustments to OTT. What makes OTT so unique is that we have just defined the characteristics of the first 30 millimeters of travel. So when we think about how much air pressure we're putting in, we're really thinking about how much support do we need in the middle and the end of the stroke. So if you are a very aggressive rider, lots of big drops and jumps, you can add more air pressure and really have that support that you need in those areas while knowing you still have high sensitivity because of the OTT. Again, looking at the base tuning chart for my body weight, we're gonna add somewhere between 110 and 125 PSI to the front fork. I'm gonna go ahead and put this right at about 120, and then we can figure out whether we need to add or remove. But I am definitely shooting for closer to that 20% sag, or right around 1 inch of travel under riding weight. All right, let's go ahead and remove the end cap and add 120 PSI. Just a little less than 120 PSI. We'll fine tune it when we go ahead and measure sag. The next step in our process is to measure sag on the front forks. Measuring sag is really the only way to ensure you have the correct air pressure in your forks. So what we're going to do is we're going to bounce the forks a few times to get the seals loose. Then we're going to take this green O-ring, we're going to push it all the way to the bottom so that when we carefully get off the bike, we can measure the distance between the top of the stanchion and the green O-ring. We're looking for right around 1 inch of travel being used. When you're ready to test sag, it's always beneficial to have a wall or something that you can use to help balance yourself. So I'm going to go ahead, bounce the shocks a few times and the forks. Then we're going to go ahead and get into our ready position. Then we're going to get into our ready position, slide the O-ring all the way down, and then slowly let ourselves off the bike. And then we'll measure how much sag was used. So with OTT set, air pressure checked with sag, we turn our attention to rebound. Rebound is how fast your fork will return to its fully extended length after taking some kind of impact. Once again, I'm not the fastest rider. I definitely don't want too much rebound. Tends to feel a little bit out of control. If we look at the base tuning guide for my body weight, the recommendation is between 8 and 12 clicks of rebound. I think I want my fork to respond a little slower than normal, so I'm gonna go with the 8. 8 clicks of rebound. 8 clicks of rebound. The last setting we're gonna look at before taking the bike out onto the trail is high-speed compression. Now, high-speed compression is how well your fork reacts when you take some of those larger hits, like drops or jumps. So currently, there is no dampening on the high-speed compression dial. And DVO, if you look at the base tuning guide for my body weight, recommends 2 or 3 clicks of high-speed compression. I'm going to go ahead and set it for 2. But one trick for moving the low-speed compression dial is to actually leverage the green one. So if you turn green all the way to the 1, we can now use it to force the black dial to move, and we want 2 clicks of high-speed compression. I hope you're able to learn something about how to set up the DVO Forks on your Cascade Peak. And if you did, do me a favor and hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel.